So why do we even learn jazz standards? What's the purpose of them? If we're a saxophone player, why do we need to know them? There's three really good reasons why, and I'm going to tell you all about that in this video. So I'm just in the studio today recording some new lessons for Sax School. Actually, I'm working on some essential jazz standard performance packs, which are something that we have inside our Sax School members library, which are packs that sort of delve into jazz standards. And it got me thinking about this whole question about why we even learn jazz standards. By the way, if you don't know about Sax School, so I run Sax School, which is a huge online community of learners. We've got thousands of students actually from all over the world that use my library of lessons to work on skills like improvising and learning the blues or altissimo, even just getting started, all sorts of stuff. You can get a 30-day trial actually and check it out yourself for free at McGillmusic.com. I'll put a link up here for you. So it got me thinking about this question anyway, about jazz standards. Why do we learn it? Now I know that some of you watching this won't even be jazz fans. You'll be playing the saxophone, you'll love playing saxophone, but you may not even be interested in jazz. And yet everyone's always banging on about this thing about learning jazz standards. Well, why is it important? And I think actually that irrespective of what sort of direction you come to from saxophone, the jazz standards are actually an important part of our learning, and there is a lot of benefit to be had from it, and there's three really good reasons for that. And the very first reason, possibly one of the most important reasons actually, is that jazz standards are part of the vocabulary that we have as saxophone players. It's part of the way that we communicate with other musicians. And in fact, if you get a whole bunch of musicians together in a room, particularly saxophone players, jazz standards are one of those things that you've got in common that you can communicate to each other with. For example, in a jam session setting, which is a great way to hone your skills, a great way to connect with other musicians, and a great way to sort of make that first step into performing. Jazz standards are the thing that you're going to be using most commonly in those settings. It doesn't need to be something really complicated. It could be a really simple jazz standard, but that's one of the first reasons why we learn them. It's a common language as saxophone players that we need to know. Now, the second super important part about learning jazz standards on saxophone is that jazz standards, and I'm talking about classic tunes that everybody knows, they are a great launch pad for understanding and implementing improvising on your saxophone. So getting a handle on things like jazz harmony, jazz theory, and also being comfortable with the whole process of improvising, jazz standards are a great launch pad for that. So basically a jazz standard can be a way that you can put together all of those skills that you're learning about, the way to approach improvising, the way to understand which notes are important in a solo, and to put them into practice in the context of learning a melody and then actually building a solo on that melody. Honestly, those skills are so important, and a jazz standard can be a great first step to that process. Now, this is important whether you want to go on to be a jazz player or whether you want to go on to be something completely different, like you want to play in a rock and roll band, or you want to play ska, or you want to play smooth jazz, or you're interested in, I don't know, playing with a DJ. There's all sorts of different types of playing you could go to, but those foundational skills are the same for every different style of playing. So you can use jazz standards as a way to really get that first sort of concrete foundation knowledge about improvising and choosing notes and jazz harmony through jazz standards. It's so important. And that's one of the reasons why inside Sax School I've got a bunch of these jazz performance packs where I've taken a standard that every saxophone player really should know. I don't know, something like Night and Day or Maiden Voyage or Girl from Ipanema, and we've gone actually in, learned the melody of course, but more importantly we've looked at the harmony, we've looked at standard sort of tactics on how to choose notes to play over notes for your solos, and then how to create melodies over those chords using those important sort of structures, melody structures. That way you know everything about the actual standard. You know the tune of course, but you know how to confidently play an awesome solo over that tune. So that's going to help you in a setting like a jazz gig or a jam session, but it's also going to help you to use that knowledge in any other setting. Now there's one more thing about learning jazz standards that I think is really important for saxophone players specifically, and this is definitely important if you're ever thinking about going out and working as a saxophone player. And that is, jazz standards give you the ability to really drill down into the different styles that we need to understand as a saxophone player. So learning jazz standards across a bunch of different styles, from, you know, classic ballads like Body and Soul to modal tunes like Maiden Voyage, or even more contemporary jazz standards. It gives you an opportunity to explore all different types of playing, different sounds on your saxophone, different melodic approaches to improvising. And that's super important. I can't tell you how important that is, because as a saxophone player, one of the great things is that you get an opportunity to play in lots of different styles. I think that's one of the things I love about playing saxophone, is I could be playing in a pop setting, I could be playing in a jazz setting, I could be playing, you know, bebop or ballads or you know, more contemporary sort of jazz. There's all these different styles of playing, and they demand different things of me as a player, but also I need to understand the sounds of that particular style so that I can be you know, I can fit in, I can be stylistically correct, and I can play in a convincing way. And that's the same whether you're looking at rock and roll playing, or ska playing, or funk playing, or playing with a DJ. So all these different sorts of styles, they require you to understand the sounds of that specific style. So learning jazz standards in a whole range of different styles helps you to develop that understanding, that vocabulary of styles and sounds on your saxophone. It's a brilliant way to explore all those different possibilities as a saxophone player. So there are three really important reasons why we should be learning jazz standards, and if you're not really checking out jazz standards yet, then I'd definitely suggest that it's something to explore, something to get started with. A great way to do it actually is with the Jazz Performance Packs inside the Sax School members area. And don't forget, you can get a 30-day trial and check out. You can actually access all of those Jazz Performance Packs and the resources that come with them. I've created backing tracks and worksheets and all sorts of stuff. But there's loads of other resources too. Tools like iReal Pro on your tablet or iPad is a great way. There's of course the Jamie Aebersold books and play-along series. There's tons of other resources online. But most importantly, I just urge you to really look closely at jazz standards. So when you go down this path of learning jazz standards, make sure you don't just look at the melody. You need to understand the style. You need to understand the harmony behind it, and you need to understand some clear tactics on how you can create really convincing solos confidently over that tune. When you've done all of those things, then you know you've mastered that jazz standard. It's part of your vocabulary, and you can pull it out the bag next time you're in a jam session or hanging out with other musicians. I hope that's been helpful to you. Don't forget to check out Sax School. Keep practicing hard, and I'll catch you next time.